Welcome to Introduction to Research, Part 3, Locating Resources. In previous sections, we've covered Part 1, what to do before you begin your research, Part 2, how do you evaluate the sources that you're finding, and Part 3, which we'll begin right now, we're getting into how do you actually go about the nitty-gritty work of locating actual resources for your research project. So remember, Introduction to Research focuses on electronic resources. There are many other types of resources available to you, but this particular series is focusing on electronic resources. In particular, we're going to focus on periodicals. Periodicals are electronic or print resources that publish content at regular intervals or periods of time. Periodicals have regular issues or volumes in which they publish articles. Some examples of periodicals would be things like journals, magazines, or newspapers. Periodical articles can be accessed via a URL or a database. Let's talk about two different common options that you will probably use in locating periodical articles. First, you have Google Scholar. It's a Google product that focuses on searching just academic resources or scholarly resources. And then you also have MyMonroe, particularly library resources under MyMonroe once you log in. So let's talk about the pros and cons of both. So with Google Scholar, you have a Google product. Nobody does searching better than Google. That means that they search incredibly widely. That is a big benefit to Google Scholar. One of the cons of Google Scholar is sort of the flip side of the pro, meaning because it searches so widely, there isn't as much ability to sort of hone in on what you're looking at and what you want to look at. So you're getting probably a lot of results that are not going to be interesting to you as well as just a lot of results in general since it's searching so widely. Looking at MyMonroe, particularly library resources, one of the pros is kind of the flip side of the con with Google Scholar. MyMonroe, library resources, enables you to put some specifications on your search that you're not able to do with Google Scholar. Particularly, with MyMonroe, you have the ability to differentiate whether you would like to look at all articles or if you would like to only look at articles that are published in peer-reviewed publications. That's really the best way for you to look for peer-reviewed publications and peer-reviewed articles. Any other way is usually a lot more time-consuming. So that's one of the pros of MyMonroe. You have an ability to specify that you only want to look at peer-reviewed resources. Additionally, you have the ability to specify that you only want to look at resources that you have access to the full text of the particular article, and you don't have that option with Google Scholar. However, one of the downsides of MyMonroe is that because it's not a Google Scholar, it's not a Google product, it can't ever search as widely as Google Scholar will be able to do. Let's talk briefly about Google Scholar. So with Google Scholar, the interface is going to look pretty familiar if you've ever used Google before. You're just going to search in the search box like you would with the regular Google homepage. So remember back in part 1, we were doing an example of background research and searching for additional terminology and issues related to our topic, which was the BP oil spill. And these were examples of some keywords that we learned about as we were doing background research about this event, the BP oil spill. And I'm bringing this back up again because as we're getting into our actual research, we really want to keep those keywords at the forefront of our mind. Sometimes I really just write them out and start using them in different combinations in order to conduct our searches most effectively. So if I do a search in Google Scholar, for example, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, you'll see I put in the search term and hit search. Some things to note with Google Scholar is that I do have some limits. On the left-hand side, you'll see I have the ability to specify what publication date range I'm interested in. On the right-hand side, not necessarily a specification, but something that's useful in using Google Scholar is to note that if there is the full text of an article available, oftentimes on the right-hand side, you'll see a particular link to the full text version of the article, not just the abstract or summary. You'll see things like a PDF or an HTML page that should lead to the full text of the article. You can see that I've decided to be a little bit more specific. Instead of just searching for the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, I've decided that I want to focus on the leadership or management at the time of the incident. So I'm adding on additional language in order to make my search more specific. So when I'm researching, I'm going to generally follow this principle, which is I'm going to go from broader to more specific. So the broadest bit of information when I get a search results list back is really just the title of the article. So I'm going to start looking at article titles in order to see if there are any that are tying into my topic. So if I scroll down, I would see this link to emergency response, doctrinal confusion, and federalism in the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So I can see on the right hand side I have a PDF that will link me to the full text of the article. And I'm just going to continue that process. I'm going to look at my search results and see, based on the titles, whether there's anything that I'm interested in. If so, I'm going to take a closer look, and we'll talk about the process of moving forward with that a little bit more when we talk about My Monroe. Something to keep in mind is that I'm not going to ever really just try one set of keywords. I'm going to try various keywords in order to get different information. So if I continue to put in the same search terms, I'm going to continue to get the same information. But there's other keywords and language that I can use in order to find articles that might be talking about my topic, but might be using slightly different terminology. I also encourage you to continue to look at page after page of results until you start to get to pages where there really isn't anything on that page that's interesting to you. As long as you're finding results on a page that have some results that are interesting to you, I would continue to look at the next page and the next page of results. So you're not leaving anything on the table that might be interesting to you. Okay, so we were just covering Google Scholar briefly. Please take a look at it. I want to cover with you, probably in more detail, the resources that you have available to you via My Monroe. So if you log into My Monroe, you'll see a link for library resources. And if you click on that, you'll see at the bottom of the page a couple of different links. Before we get into the actual searching, I just want to point out something to you really briefly. You'll see a link for downloadable resources. If you click on downloadable resources, you'll see several useful handouts for you, but in addition to these handouts, you'll also see links to the hours and contact information for the Graduate Academic Support Service Centers on both the Bronx and the New Rochelle campus. So please keep in mind that as you have questions in your research or in your writing, to connect with one of the centers on either campus for additional help. Okay. So if we go back, we'll get back to our links. We looked at downloadable resources. Now we're going to look at databases. Okay, so what are databases? Databases are the tools that help you access the current and archival information from many different publications. As a Monroe College student, you have access to resources that you don't have access to as a private individual. You may have had this experience in the past, which is when you go to look at an article online, it will tell you to log in or pay some sort of fee in order to view the article. That's because you're trying to look at the article as a private individual. However, as a Monroe College student, you have access to many different publications, but you have to authenticate or demonstrate your affiliation with Monroe College in order to gain access to those resources. The way that you access those privileges is through the databases. The databases give you access to many different publications as a Monroe College student. So you'll see this long list of databases. There's even more than are pictured here. I know it can seem sort of overwhelming. You will want to kind of play around here and get familiar with more resources. We're going to just focus on a very little bit of this today, but we're really focusing more on principles that you can apply to many different databases. So in that list of databases, you have some databases that are very general. They cover lots of different disciplines. You also have some databases that are discipline specific, so they're really focusing on a particular area. So here you'll see that I pointed out just a couple of key databases that are of interest to particular discipline areas, including public health, criminal justice, and business. These are not by any means all of the databases or the only databases that you can use in those particular disciplines, but it's just trying to give you an idea of where to get started. Okay, so let's say we selected one of those databases. In this case, you'll see at the top we selected the ABI Inform Collection database, and we're going to conduct a search. So just like we were doing in Google Scholar, we're going to use a phrase in order to begin our search. So I'm going to go with the BP oil spill, and particularly management principles related to the BP oil spill, principles or issues. You'll see that I have the option to say I only want to look at full text articles. So I almost always recommend checking that box so that when you get your search results back, you're only getting links to articles where you can read the full article, not just a summary. And then you also have the option for peer-reviewed articles. So if I check that box, I can say in my search results, I only want to look at articles that are peer-reviewed. If you have the requirement to only use peer-reviewed articles or to use so many peer-reviewed articles in your research project, then really using the peer-reviewed option in the My Monroe Library Resources databases is the best way to go about doing that to ensure that your articles are from peer-reviewed publications. Okay, so now that I've made my selections and used my keywords, I'm going to click on the search button. Okay, so you'll notice right off the bat with my search, I had 777 results. It's quite a few. So you'll see below that I have some options to help me limit my results, narrow my results, and hopefully to make my results more specific to my particular topic. So you'll first note under section B that I have source type. So I could say, okay, I only want to look at scholarly journals. Also, under section C, I have the ability to specify a particular date range. Since this incident occurred in 2010, I probably don't want to look at any articles that come back on this topic that were published prior to 2010. Okay, so you can see that by putting some of those limits on, I've lowered my results to 653. I've said that I only wanted to look at scholarly articles, and I revised my publication dates. If I scroll down a little bit more, I'll see that I have additional options. So I could say I only want to look at particular subjects of articles. I could say that I only want to look at articles that are published in a particular location. For example, maybe I don't want to look at results that come back that focus on areas outside of the U.S. I really just want to focus on the U.S. implications. Sometimes with some topics, there's a lot of articles published in non-English languages. If I only speak English, then I probably want to only select the option for only English written articles. Okay. So similar to what we did in Google Scholar, when I get my search results list back, I want to start making decisions based on going from broadest to most specific. So first things first, I'm just going to start looking at the titles in my results list to see if there are any articles that sound interesting to my topic area. So this article, What BP Teaches About Ethics, Risk, and Business Management, sounds interesting to me. So I'm going to click on that article. The first thing I'm going to do is look at the abstract. You'll see under section A. So the abstract is going to tell me what this article is about. Based on the abstract, I may be able to make a decision. I might say, okay, this article just really isn't related to my topic. I'm going to go back and I'm going to continue to look at my search results list or try a new search. Or I may look at the article and say, the abstract, and say, okay, this article is exactly what I want to look at. I'm going to hold on to this one and keep on looking, which is really what I recommend. It takes time to read research articles, so instead of taking the time right then to read each article, I would say gather several articles that you think are related to your topic, and then set aside time later in order to really dig into those articles and digest them and make sure you understand the content. So if based on the abstract I decide that I'm interested in this article, I'm going to go ahead and try to hold on to it right then. So you'll see in section B of the page that we have a couple of different options here. I can download that PDF and save it to my USB drive, for example, or I could download it and then upload it to some sort of online drive like OneDrive or Google Drive. I could email it to myself from here. I could print it. It doesn't really matter how you hold on to an article, but I do recommend that you save or hold on to good articles as you go along. One of the saddest things in the world for me is when a student comes to me and says, I found this really great article and I can't find it again. So, don't let your time be wasted. Go ahead and just hold on to any interesting articles as you go along. You'll also note there is a link to Cite, C-I-T-E, Cite. This is an option for you to generate a entry in what would be your reference list in your final paper. What I say is go ahead and take a look at that if you have that option in the database, and copy and paste it into a Word document so that if you do end up using the source, you do have the beginnings of an entry for your reference list. However, I will say you would always need to double check what the database generates for you. It's great because at least you don't have to type out everything, including the title and the name of the journal and the name of the author, but you will always need to double check the formatting. Okay, so let's say we found this article. It ended up being just a really great fit for our topic. So then the next thing I would encourage you to do is to, whenever you find a really pertinent article, is to maximize that result. So some ways that you can maximize that result is if you have one really good article, let it help you by pointing you to other pertinent articles. So first things first, you'll see under section C a link to the author's name. Usually a scholar in a given field publishes many things related to the same topic. Scholars are experts in very specific areas, so if they published one article that's related to your topic, it's very possible that they've published other things that are related to your topic as well. So you can see that the name of the author is a link, so I recommend clicking on that link to see what other articles they may have published. You'll see in section D several links for other related items. It's kind of like if you've ever gone to Amazon, it says if you like this thing, you may like these other things. It's making recommendations to you. So I do recommend that you check out those articles to see if there are any related articles that may be interesting to you. Finally, if I scroll all the way to the end of the article, you'll see that I start to see their citations. In this particular article, they're using footnotes, so the style format they're using is footnotes. So by looking at those footnotes, you can decide, are there any articles that this article has referenced that will be useful to you as well? If so, you can take that citation to track it down and see if that article would in fact be useful. We're going to talk in just a minute about how do you take a particular citation and locate the full text of that particular reference. Okay, but I'm not going to just stop with the one really good article. I'm going to go back and revise my search. In this case, maybe I want to focus on the BP oil spill, or I could say the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and the health effects. So I've revised my search to be BP oil spill health. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to start looking at the search results to see which articles are related to my topic. Based on the title, I'm going to click on the article and look at the abstract to figure out if the article is useful to me. Sometimes from the article, you may actually not know whether, based on the abstract, you may not know whether the article is going to be useful to you, and you may need to skim the article to just kind of figure out a little bit more about what the article is about, or maybe there's terminology in the abstract that you're not quite familiar with, and you may have to skim the article in order to figure out what some of that terminology means before you can make a decision about whether the article is pertinent to your topic or not. But I'm going to just continue that process of revising my search, looking at the search results, again, continuing to the next page and the next page of results until I get to a page where there really aren't any more results that are interesting to my topic. I have lots of different words that I learned from my background research phase, so I'm going to continue to use those different keywords and different combinations. I will say keep track of what you're doing. If you're searching one database with some terms, make sure that when you go to a different database, you're trying the same terms again, because there are different resources that you have available in that database. And it's also helping you to keep track that you're not using the same words over and over again. So do keep track of what you're doing and try different words in order to yield different results. Okay, so let's go back and talk about locating a particular article. So let's say I did see a citation or a reference at the end of an article that I wanted to track down. There are many ways to go about tracking down a particular article. We're just going to talk about 2 examples of how to progress with that. So first, you could look at Google Scholar and put in some of that citation information. Maybe I would start with the full title of the article in search, or maybe I'd do the full title and plus one of the author's last names, maybe the full title of the article and the name of the publication. So I'm going to put in a lot of the information to see if I can track down that one article. And what we're doing is we're using one of the strengths of Google Scholar in order to let it help us. So it searches so widely, if we give it very specific information, it's going to do a good job of tracking down whether there is any access to this particular article. So try that under Google Scholar, but as we've mentioned before, there are publications that you have access to as a Monroe College student that you don't have access to as a private individual using Google Scholar. So you can also try My Monroe. When you click on My Monroe in Library Resources, under the Databases option, you'll see a link for Discovery Service for Monroe. Discovery Service for Monroe is sort of like the Google Scholar of the My Monroe world. It's letting you search almost all of the databases at the same time. You're probably wondering, why didn't you tell me that to begin with? Well, I really don't recommend that you start with Discovery Service, because it's going to be pulling from a lot of different publications that are not related to your topic area. So I usually recommend that you go to Discovery Service when you've either exhausted all your other resources, you're not finding a lot of things in any other databases, or you're finding too much in the other databases and you've decided that you want to be very specific in your search. Then using Discovery Service with a really specific search, so it has several keywords or has a very specific phrase, would probably be a good use of your time. But another good use of Discovery Service is, as we were discussing before, is tracking down a very particular article. And then we would just do the same thing that we would do in Google Scholar, which is typing in the full title of the article, maybe adding in one of the author's last names or the publication title, in order to see if we can track down that specific article. Okay, so let's recap what we've done. In part 1 of Introduction to Research, we covered some of the steps that you take before you actually begin your research. So you're going to conduct some brief background research so that when you get into your actual research, you're going to be able to do it more efficiently and more effectively. In part 2, we looked at evaluating sources. So when you find a potential source, you want to evaluate, what is the source? What type of resource is it? And is it appropriate to my particular assignment and what I'm trying to accomplish? In part 3 that we just finished, locating resources, we talked about choosing an appropriate tool, whether it be Google Scholar or MyMonroe. We talked about how you limit your search results based on lots of different things, such as source type, saying perhaps only scholarly publications, or maybe by date. We talked about using various keywords. We don't want to just focus on one word or one phrase and use that over and over again. We want to try several different words or phrases and in different combinations in different resources. And we talked about maximizing a good resource. So if we find one really good article, we want to use that one really good article to let it lead us to other good articles, either by looking to see what other things the author has published, what are related articles to this particular article, or what resources is the article citing. Finally, just keep track of what you've tried as you're going through the research process. You don't want to do the same thing over and over again. So maybe you have an excellent memory, but if, like me, you don't have an excellent memory, just keep track of what you've done so that when you continue with your research, you're trying new things. Okay, the next step is go and try it. Just like everything, you really just have to give it a try and see what you find and revise your technique as we've discussed and try again. However, as you're going through the process of researching for your project, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Please contact the Graduate Research Center at either the email or phone number shown on your screen. We're happy to help you. Best of luck.